My name is Denise Conan, and I'm from First Universalist Church of Minneapolis. And we are hosting this because we like to do anything that we can to create more community. And I want to welcome the candidates here from Ward 10. And I also want to welcome you and all the people who are watching today. And we at First Universalist like to open our doors to anyone working to create more community in our city. And I'd like to now introduce Carla uh, Arredondo from Pueblos de Lucha y Esperanza. Thank you.
Good morning and welcome to all the candidates. Thank you for taking your time to come out. As Denise mentioned, my name is Carla Arredondo. I'm the director of Pueblos de Lucha y Esperanza. And I would like to welcome Marcus from Whittier just for co-hosting the event with us. So before we get started, just a few reminders. All candidates will have the opportunity to answer the question. You will have 2 minutes. We will be switching off, Marcus and I. And thank you for coming out to the Community Ward 10 Forum. Pueblos de Lucha y Esperanza and Whittier do not endorse or recommend any of the candidates. We are allowing this space for you to share your thoughts, your views as to why you're running for this candidacy. So thank you for coming out. And now I will pass it on to Marcus to talk a little bit about ranked choice voting.
Yeah, hi everyone. Marcus Vandersanden from the Whittier Alliance, Whittier Neighborhood in Ward 10. Thank you all for coming out. This is just a reminder to the viewers that Minneapolis has ranked choice voting elections, so there is not a primary election. You have the power to rank candidates in the order of your preference on your November ballot. So as you hear from the candidates today, consider all of them, not just your first choice, but also your second and third choices as well. And you can learn more about ranked choice voting in the chat section. There should be a link for you.
Before we start, we will allow you to share your name and why you're running for 2 minutes. So if we want to start with David, please share your name and why you're running for candidate.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. It's great that we have this forum and an opportunity actually to have the candidates together live. It's the first time we've had that opportunity. We're grateful for it. My name is David Wheeler. I am running for City Council, Ward 10. The reason I do this is because I have done it before. I was a Duluth City Council member. I was vice president of the council. I was chair of the finance committee. I served on DETA, the Duluth Economic Development Authority. When I moved to the Twin Cities, the most recent move was in '97, which was quite a few years ago, actually. After a few years, I decided to run for the Board of Estimate and Taxation. I've been elected 3 times. Ranked choice voting, which works very well, did that across the city. And with all of the difficulties of this past year, I decided it was really important that somebody with a different kind of temperament be on the city council. Somebody who has worked before with people who don't agree with you, people who can't find consensus, because this is a big problem. We need to elect people that have a sense of how to govern, not just how to support a particular issue, but how to actually make a difference for all the citizens of Minneapolis. Of course, the big issues are obviously public safety. We know that. Other issues have to do with economic development. Lake Street was decimated, as we know, and we have to pay attention to the small businesses and the minority group businesses there and help them redevelop. And I think it's really important that we revitalize our downtown and create jobs all over the city, well-paying jobs. People need good jobs. Thank you very much. It's good to be with you, and I'm looking forward to this time together. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Katie Jones, and I'm running for Minneapolis City Council because when I moved here, my neighbors welcomed me and opened doors for me. And I want everyone who lives here to feel that way too, to know that they belong and that this community has their back. I'm an engineer, a community builder, and a climate advocate. And as I've spent time in Ward 10 with my neighborhood association, as well as working at City Hall and a couple of city advisory committees, I've worked to bring people together and to listen deeply. This city has big challenges, and it feels like we're more divided than ever before. But experience has shown me that that's more perception than reality. Whether it's been through bringing organics recycling options to renters or addressing a historical racial injustice in Mueller Park, I've seen that it's possible to pull together a wide array of stakeholders and fix broken systems. I'm running for city council because I want to work with you to build a Minneapolis that is more just, equitable, and sustainable. This list starts with justice for a reason. Recent events and decades of overt and structural racism have created an inequitable city. It's time to right these wrongs. A just Minneapolis ensures stable housing for all, as well as economic opportunity. It invests in violence prevention and allocates resources to appropriate public safety responders. In a connected Minneapolis, we have options for how we get around and can each access what we need via a 15-minute walk, bike, roll, or transit ride. In this Minneapolis, sidewalks are navigable for all neighbors in all seasons. And a sustainable Minneapolis thrives while minimizing environmental impacts. It invests in green job creation through worker training and business resources. It incentivizes sustainable new development and creates clean energy for all. I'll continue to fight for a more just, connected, and sustainable Minneapolis. No matter how divided we feel, it is possible to realize our shared vision. It'll take you, and it'll take a leader who can bring you to the table for solutions-oriented dialogues. As an engineer and a community builder, convening and problem solving is what I do. When I moved here, you opened doors for me, and now I'm running for this seat to open the doors of City Hall for you. Thank you.
Buenos dias todos los gente. Me llamo Chris Parsons. I'm running for City Council in Ward 10. Gracias a Pueblos de Luchas y Esperanza for hosting this event today. I consider myself very lucky to have been able to grow up in Minneapolis. My parents moved here from a small town in Iowa 44 years ago. I'm 46. I grew up in the Marcy Holmes neighborhood in a two-bedroom apartment in a mixed race family. I've watched this city grow from a sleepy flyover place to a place where people want to come to live, raise a family, to work. I've watched our community grow, especially the Marcy Holmes neighborhood where I grew up. It went from being an area of dive bars and empty warehouses to luxury apartments and trendy restaurants and cafes. So much growth. I've watched people, I've watched corporations and businesses open downtown, jobs come into the city. But right now, what I'm seeing is a city and a city council that is not necessarily meeting the needs of the people of Minneapolis. We're not meeting the needs of everyone in Minneapolis. This is no longer the place that I recognize where people want to grow old and retire and raise a family. It's actually becoming a city in decline, especially when you look at all of the empty businesses on Lake Street, the boarded up buildings, and especially the drama that we've gone through in the last year. This city is a rose, but it does have a lot of thorns. In order to meet our challenges of today, in order to reform our policing, to protect our city, to bring jobs back to the city where people can, where we can have livability, affordability, we're going to need leadership at the council. And I've done that for the last 21 years as a public servant, as a firefighter, and also leading in my role as a labor leader for the last 16. So we need leadership and we need change. And if you vote for me, if you make me your first choice, I will help bring that change.
Perfect. Is this? Yeah, okay. Hi, my name is Aisha Chugtai. I am a renter, community organizer, union activist, first generation immigrant, and Muslim American. And I'm running for the Minneapolis City Council in Ward 10 because the stakes are incredibly high today for renters, for people living in poverty, for queer and trans people, for Black, Brown, and Indigenous people, and they're only getting higher. During the uprising last summer, when white supremacists were threatening to burn my neighborhood down, my neighbors and I came together to protect and support one another. We built one of the largest mutual aid sites in this city, a pimento kitchen, to make sure all of our neighbors had access to the groceries and resources that they needed when all of the local stores were boarded up. I've spent my time working to elect progressive leaders to public office across the state. In the labor movement, I work to build power with working class people so that we can live in a more just world. I've spent my career working on bringing people together to build communities where everyone can live safe and joyful lives. I'm dedicated to fighting shoulder to shoulder with my community for equity and justice for all Minneapolis residents. I will be a champion for policies like fair scheduling that protect working class people. I will fight for rent control and tenant protections to make sure that everyone can stay in the homes and in the neighborhoods they love. And I will be a bold voice for leading us down the path to recognizing safety for all by defunding the Minneapolis Police Department and fully funding our communities. I want to be a champion for the people in Minneapolis who are often forgotten, our renters, students, our unhoused neighbors, and working class people like me. I want to make sure that we are connecting our neighbors with big hearts, with those who need someone to show up and fight alongside them. That's what my campaign is all about, and I hope to earn your support. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Alicia Gibson, and I'm running to serve as the Ward 10 City Council member because I have a unique set of skills and experiences that are relevant for Ward 10 and for Minneapolis in this moment. First, I trained as in peace and conflict resolution and looked at large scale international conflict to understand how communities transition from trauma to healing, and most recently continued that study in restorative justice facilitation. Second, I am trained as a lawyer and worked in environmental and federal Indian law. I know firsthand the ways that our legal system does not always support our most vulnerable and marginalized communities. This is actually why I am now in Minnesota. I earned a PhD in comparative literature and cultural studies at the University of Minnesota, where my research focused on the atomic bombings of Hiroshima and Nagasaki, and also the internment of Japanese Americans in concentration camps. While there, I taught students how to think critically about race, gender, and economic exploitation. I've also owned my own small business. I opened a small used bookstore. And so I understand the pressures that are facing our small business community right now to rebuild after the uprisings, but also after COVID. I know the pressures of making payroll, of bringing customers in the door, but also some of those nitty gritty things that get left behind, like how you even get financing to start a small business to begin with. And lastly, I have served as a community organizer. Among other things, I started a small business association, and for the past 4 years have been working in my neighborhood association, eventually serving as the president. As your city council member, I will serve you with 2 feet firmly planted on the ground, building a better world for today and tomorrow, empowering community through restorative justice, economic justice, and environmental justice.
Hi, I'm Stephen Fritsch. I'm a queer man, a democratic socialist, and currently I work as a project manager for a major transportation company working with electric driverless vehicles. I'm running for City Council in Ward 10 to really signal a platform and policies that are for poor and working class people, from a $25 minimum wage to no fare public transportation, defunding the police, and police accountability mainly through a civilian police accountability council. I'm running because I want to see a city that is more equitable for the people, one that's climate forward, and one that is actually for the working class people of the city. I'm running as a democratic socialist specifically because I want to signal to the leaders in the Democratic Party that these are the future of the party and that we need to start thinking very broad and commit to policies that are very progressive in order to actually create change that we want to see in the city and in the world. Thanks.
Thank you. Just to remind our audiences at home, if you would like to submit a question for our candidates, you can do it via the chat, and we will make sure to get it out to the candidates. Now I will bring Marcus back so he will get us going.
Yeah. Awesome. Thank you all for your introductions. It's great. The first question, which some of you touched on a little bit in your introductions, we would like you all to speak to what skill or experience do you have that you believe will prepare you to be an effective council member and allow you to more specifically navigate bureaucracy work and work with other city council members, the mayor, and city staff. Katie, if you could please begin.
So of course, using the microphone actually helps a lot. When it comes to thinking about bureaucracy, I've definitely lived it. I worked in City Hall in the Sustainability Office for 5 years, and so have an understanding of the various departments of City Hall and how to actually get things done. There are 3 energy disclosure policies that are on the books that I helped draft and get move through council, and that took actually I was the coordinator of making those policies move. I brought together people from a variety of departments so we could collaborate together on what the language of those would be, what the stakeholder outreach would need to be in terms of external as well as internal, and what are going to be the internal operations for that. And actually, for my current role, I work with cities on energy policies throughout the metro and actually throughout the state. And so I actually have a series of workshops on how to navigate bureaucracy to make sure that we're figuring out policy framework, the internal operations for how that would actually work within the city, and then how we would engage stakeholders on moving a particular policy forward. Beyond that, I've served on a couple of advisory committees at both the city, the parks, and the state level. So understanding that there are lots of ways for community members to plug in. So I've sat on the Capital Long Range Improvement Committee, which is essentially the infrastructure committee. We look at the 120 capital projects, so bridges and roads and sidewalks and sewer infrastructure, all of that. So understanding that layer of detail is really important, and understanding where people can plug in to actually to have their voices heard. So we heard actually 2 weeks ago at our public hearing concerns about brown water and how can the CLIC make recommendations to the council for their budget operations in order to make sure that those community concerns are addressed. Beyond that, I've also worked on the Sustainable Transportation Advisory Committee to MnDOT and the Parks Master Planning Committee here in Southwest. So all of those at different levels are really important to make sure that we understand how to work together throughout our local governments. Thank you.
So this is a question and an issue that I am uniquely qualified because I have a proven track record of leadership and getting accomplishments. I've been a firefighter for 21 years. I've been a labor leader for the last 16. My first 8 years in labor leadership, I dealt with the city council in St. Paul and I also worked with neighborhood groups and other stakeholders to enhance safety on the St. Paul Fire Department and thus enhance safety to the community. In doing so, I worked with city council members, candidates, and even the mayor. When we ran into roadblocks, so to speak, I pushed a little harder. At the state level, I've lobbied at the Capitol for the last almost 8 years now, and I've been able to push through legislation that have protected the health and safety of firefighters, but also the public. I twice passed bills to ban toxic flame retardants in upholstered furniture and children's products. In doing so, I met steep resistance from the American Chemistry Council, the North American Flame Retardant Alliance, and also the Republicans at the state legislature. When I ran into roadblocks, we just knuckled down. We didn't accept that we were going to be told no. I led a effort to get those bills passed. I've also worked on health and safety initiatives pertaining to mental health and also cancer awareness among firefighters so that we could change legislation at the state legislature to better support our first responders. And just this last spring, I led a coalition of labor groups to provide workers' compensation protection for 50,000 healthcare workers and first responders in case they were to contract COVID-19. So that's just a little bit of what I have. You can go to my website, Christopher Ward 10, for more information on my accomplishments. But I have a proven track record of getting things done in our government.
Yeah, so I talked about being a renter, community organizer, and working in the labor movement. And those experiences, both my lived ones and the work that I've done over the last few years, has taught me that policy actually doesn't move inside closed rooms. It moves when people come together and they demand that the systems that are hurting them, that are oppressing them, have to change, right? Like, work moves when people demand that that's what's happened, that nothing else will work. And so, I have spent my time organizing, and I've learned that we we have the ability to change people's hearts and minds when we talk to them, when we bring people together, when we help them see their stake in fights that are not explicitly theirs. That is how, over these last 4 years, we've been able to organize our community, right? I live in Whittier. My community has organized itself and our council member, and then effectively the rest of the city council, that we need them to fight for rent control, right? And this year, we are likely to have a ballot measure that allows people to vote on that on the ballot. And so I think that's an example of how we really move change through organizing people, through being in community with each other, through letting and following the lead of people's movements that are closest to the ground and know what people are looking for. And then, I think that there's work that I want to do that's about making sure that our city processes are more accessible to all of the different people in our community, that the most marginalized people have the most amount of access, because the people closest to the pain should be closest to the decision-making power.
And Alicia, if I could just jump in really quickly, after the third candidate goes in our panel, we'll be just taking the time to remind the audience the question as well as the candidate form. So the question is, what skill or experience do you have that you believe will prepare you to be an effective council member and allow you to navigate bureaucracy, work with other council members, the mayor, and city staff?
Yeah, so I think that actually almost everyone living in this modern world has experiences navigating bureaucracy, right? This is really the feature of modern life. I'm trained as a lawyer. I understand a lot of the lingo, the lexicon, that is used in city government. So I don't have any concerns that I will be able to figure that out. I also served as a judicial clerk for the Jefferson County courthouse. And so that was a government bureaucracy that I had to figure out. The real question here that I think has not yet been addressed is how am I going to work with people? Right, bureaucracies are also people. It's a system of people. But then the other part of the question that really has not been touched on is working with other council members, the mayor, and city staff. And I think that the thing here that I want to reiterate is that it's time for collaboration. It's time for people who really want to find the most unifying ideas rather than most divisive ideas, and work to get to win-win situations, that things that work for everybody across the entire city, as well as for this ward. And that is something that that is the kind of person I am, that is the kind of leader I am. When I served as the president of the Lowry Hill East Association, this is a really dynamic neighborhood with people who have very divergent ideas sometimes. And we were able to really have a joyful experience of working together by focusing on those unifying ideas. The other thing that I liked what Aisha was saying here at the end of her answer, and that is that we really need a system that isn't impossible to navigate for all people. And so that is one of the things that I have a reform mind walking in as well. If this is difficult to do for me, then it is something that needs to change, because everybody, especially the people that are particularly left behind, should be able to navigate this system.
So I think this is a really good question about experience, and everyone here is very experienced, so that's really great to see. Speaking for myself, I worked as a real estate agent for a couple of years, so I have specific insight with housing issues and renters issues. Also working with purchase agreements and contracts. That's very specific language working on a contract and the fine details that go with that. I've also worked for a number of years as a grassroots organizer, so really helping out unhoused folks with food drives, sanitary products, winter weather clothing, um, organized anti-war protests with the Democratic Socialists of America down in Jacksonville, and then also worked with Black socialist organizations down in Jacksonville as well, working on defunding the police down there. They're getting about 40% of the city's budget, and they're really focused on, or not focused on, solving crime actually. So a number of organizations that I've worked with really helped me see that on the ground need for change. Currently, I work as a project manager, and with this, it's advanced technology and emerging technology, and with that, we have international teams and even across the United States here with projects that are millions of dollars. And as the project manager, you really focus on mitigating risks and constant changing dynamics, in situations. I think I'd be able to work pretty well with the other counselors because we have a pretty progressive city council here, but we have a lot of more progressive people coming in all across the city and running for seats. And I think running as a Democratic Socialist, I can kind of bring a different perspective to the city council that a lot of people might not be looking for.
Well, this is a really good question. I don't want to affirm what Alicia said about the bottom line is it's about building relationships. If you don't have good, strong relationships with the people you work with, then you're not really able to come to consensus or to find compromise when you are facing difficult things. I'm the only person here who has been a city council member before. And for the last dozen years, I have served on the Board of Estimate and Taxation. I've worked with 3 of our mayors quite closely. I have worked closely with a lot of the council members, people who are on the park board, and I have the ability to sit down and agree with people who disagree with me. We had an example last week where there was a person who had pretty strongly objected to one of the proposals that had come forward and wanted a delay and all that kind of stuff. And so we went through the delay, waited a couple of weeks. And so I then called that person and asked him if he would be on a committee with me to help solve the problem. He said, "Oh, when I thought I opposed it, I didn't think you'd ever ask me." Well, I wasn't going to force him to do it. But that's the kind of thinking we need, where you sit down and talk to people who disagree with you and try to bring them in and bring them along. And that's a skill I've had as a pastor for 40 years. I've done this. I've done it in nonprofits. I've done it in the for-profit world. I am the person that has real good experience and a really good temperament and a great sense of humor and an ability to work hard with all different kinds of people. And we need to build access for people that don't have access now. I completely agree with that. Your points are excellent and well taken, because if we don't listen to the ground up, it won't get to where it needs to be. Thank you very much, and we're having some fun here. Thanks.
Thank you. Just to remind candidates, please, when you're responding to the question, please look at camera number 2 by Gustavo. And we will move on to the second question. What steps will you take to prevent Ward 10 residents from being displaced from their homes? Please include your positions on tenant opportunity to purchase and rent control. Again, what steps will you take to prevent Ward 10 residents from being displaced from their homes? Please include your positions on tenant opportunity to purchase and rent control. And we will start off with Alicia. Alicia? Aisha? No, yes. Yeah.
Sorry, I thought we were.
We were going one down. What you told us we were going to do. The next person would be
Oh, Chris? Okay. It's Chris.
Sure.
It's Chris.
Yeah. No worries. No worries. Yeah. So this is obviously a great question because everybody deserves the right to an affordable home, and they deserve the right to a safe home also. So there's 4 things that we need to do. Number one, we need to make sure that we're building housing for everybody, and that includes families. In the last decade, about 92% of what we've been building has been 2 bedrooms or less. It's also been all rental, about 90% rental housing. We need to provide for housing for families, so that would be 3 bedroom plus, ideally. Number 2, we need good paying jobs. The best way to keep people in their homes is to have a good paying job, which means we need to have an environment where businesses can thrive. So that's a safe neighborhood, a safe city, and also a safe ward. Number 3, we need to allow people access to home ownership. If we're going to drive down our racial disparities, especially the wealth gap, we need to make sure that people can buy into owning their home. For most of us, our home is our greatest asset, and the way that we build wealth. So if we're going to drive down those disparities, we're going to have to do that. And also, we're going to need to reverse our city policies where we're taking away our home ownership opportunities. We're allowing for the destruction of affordable housing and having housing that is unaffordable built in its place. That is just simply not sustainable. We have a $1.5 billion transfer of wealth from people that are disproportionately black and brown out of this city to corporations each year. So we need to reverse that. On rent control, I'm not for rent control. I don't believe that this city needs it. We can do policies that will make housing more affordable without putting artificial caps on the market. And so I'm not, the 2 places that are always pointed to for rent control are San Francisco and New York. 2 places I've been, 2 places that are totally unaffordable, and I don't think that that's the answer for Minneapolis.
All right, yeah, I believe that housing is a human right and not a commodity. As a renter and as a person who has experienced housing insecurity my entire life, I know the fear of being priced out of your neighborhood and in the community that you love. Our approach to fighting back against displacement has to be to increase new affordable housing options and preserving existing ones while limiting displacement. We have to make sure that everyone, regardless of how long they've been here or how much money they make, has a safe and dignified place to live. You know, we need to prioritize an anti-displacement agenda to address affordability that includes increasing tenant protections in this city. I support a charter amendment for establishing municipal rent control in Minneapolis so that we can make sure that there's a cap to how much rent can increase year to year, and so we can stabilize prices of rent for folks who rent in this city. We have to pass measures that protect against evictions, like just cause protection, and we have to make our screening criteria for for renting a place become more inclusive so that we don't punish people for being poor or for having made mistakes in their life. We also have to make it easier for people to pool together their money and purchase the building that they're living in through a Tenant Opportunity to Purchase Act. We have to invest in public housing as a city, and we have to fight back against efforts to privatize existing public housing units, as well as loosening restrictions for municipal restrictions for creative house that will allow us to explore creative housing solutions like cooperatives and affordable micro units.
Yes, thank you. I think that this question really goes to the heart of economic justice, and that is one of the primary planks of my campaign. So what this means in very specific, proposals that I have is, first of all, I would love to see Minneapolis be a pilot city for universal basic income. There was a recent study out of Stockton, California, that followed a group of people that it was a private-public partnership where they gave people who were kind of on the margins $500 a month for 2 years to see what would happen. What they found was that actually people made really good decisions with that extra $500. They were able to stabilize their housing. They were able to find better jobs. They took training that really changed their lives. And so I would like to see us to join that movement so we create good data and that this becomes something that maybe the federal government picks up as more and more, good outcomes come from that. Another parts of this economic justice platform, I would like to see us be a city that rolls out a plan for housing reparations. We can do this using our neighborhood association financing structures. And this would allow this would allow neighborhoods, communities to favor, racially discriminate in a good way in order to close that wealth gap and that create housing stability. The other thing that I have talked about is affordable housing land banking, actually also through that neighborhood association. This would be through a new NRP, neighborhood revitalization plan, so that we are saving our naturally occurring affordable housing. This is what we hear from our partners, that we must do this. I'm interested also in some kind of a rent stabilization, rent control, but I think that this is something that we need to be really careful about and make sure that we are studying and offering plans that work, because what we have is stabilization and affordability on the other side. And you can solve for one, you can solve for stabilization and actually go backwards on affordability. So I want us to do it the right way to make sure that we aren't creating unintended negative consequences. Thank you.
Thank you. And before we continue on, just to remind our audience members of the question, what steps will you take to prevent Ward 10 residents from being displaced from their homes? Please include your positions on the tenant opportunity to purchase and rent control. Again, what steps will you take to prevent Ward 10 residents from being displaced from their homes? Please include your positions on the tenant opportunity to purchase and rent control.
Thanks for reading that again. So this is so important because Minneapolis is a city of renters, and Whittier specifically, it's almost 80%. So it's ridiculous how high the number of renters are in the city. So what we really need to focus on is the economic precarity that's happened over this last year through COVID and job insecurity. So what we need to do in Minneapolis is we need to make sure that we have the courts, continue the moratorium on evictions so that no one is displaced out of their home. And there's organizations out there already that provide rental assistance. The city council can foot that bill easy. There's no reason these small nonprofits or private organizations have to do that when we have city money that can provide something like that. So I think the city council currently, immediately, should pass an ordinance to pay that bill so that people are not evicted. I support the Minneapolis for rent control, especially the 3% cap on rental increases. I've faced a 45% increase at one point in time, and it's insane. Actually, rent control does work, and it helps protect the people that live there. We have so many vacant units in the city, and we need to prioritize keeping them affordable. With that, I want to start transitioning over towards income-based rent throughout the city, and we could start with apartment complexes over 10 units. Moving to 10%, as a city ordinance. And if these property management companies or property developers, have an issue with it, we can just give them tax abatement to kind of compensate them for that. So there's a number of different ways we can help people stay in their housing and keep it affordable for them. Of course, that income-based rent includes unhoused folks. Yeah, sorry, there's so many things. We got to start establishing more community land trusts so that people can buy homes and keep it affordable if they want to do that.
I need you to move this. The light is right in my face, and I literally cannot look at the camera with it there. It really hurts my eyes. Thank you. That's a little better. Appreciate that. So. Housing is an absolutely crucial piece for all of us. We need to have a safe and a good place to live, and it has to be within reason in terms of affordability. They say that if you're spending more than 35% of your income on your rent, it puts you in a very, very awkward spot. And many of us actually spend more than that for our rent. There's just no question about it. It's a very complex issue, and it needs to be multifaceted. There aren't simple solutions to difficult problems. There are only hard solutions to difficult problems. And this is going to take work up by the city, by the county, by the state, by money coming in from the federal government. I am not in favor of rent control. I think the idea sounds fabulous, and most cities where it's actually gone into effect, it has caused tremendous difficulties and sort of made things actually more unfair in so many ways. So what we need to do is make sure that we use a whole variety of suggestions that have come out and been mentioned here to make sure that there is affordable housing. And we should not be destroying the affordable housing that we have, and that has been happening at too great a rate. We need to take a look at single residency options for people. There are some very creative nonprofits and others that are dealing with the whole issue of housing, and I think we have to not look just to government to solve the problem, but we can also look to nonprofits, we can look to faith communities, we can look a whole bunch of places. In terms of the Tenant Opportunity to Purchase Act, TOPA as it is called, again, great idea, but it really sort of makes the whole market be sort of strange and not work well. So I think we have to figure out how to make sure that tenants do have an opportunity to purchase, but we need to do it in a different way. Thank you very much, and on to the next one.
Thank you. So we have to start off by saying, housing is the foundation to a successful and joyful life. And that means we need housing today, tomorrow, and in the future. We have to recognize that today there are people who are already displaced, and we need to address their needs. I'm really encouraged by examples like the Indoor Villages project, which I know the city has invested in, and I want us to continue investing in projects like that can help people get off the streets. Second, we need housing in the future, and there are, as an engineer, I like tools, and I like to have a really full toolbox. So we've got a number of tools that we can use to address this really complex issue that is housing. First one is 4D, which it provides a tax abatement for landlords to keep their properties affordable for 10 years. And I think that's an excellent tool that we need to be utilizing more. Community land trusts, which have been mentioned, inclusionary zoning. So we have that on the books. It's been a policy we've had for a couple of years, but it's about time for us to revisit that and understand how it's working, analyze what are the actual thresholds for affordability that are being met or not being met, and make sure we address or we alter the policy in order to get at that. It was also mentioned that a number of our the housing units that are going up right now are not or single one bedroom or studios. And I was actually just reading about a policy in Vancouver today that that incentivizes 2+ bedroom units by actually mandating that in 25% of units that are being built. As far as rent stabilization goes, I find it a very intriguing idea. I don't believe that it's right for landlords to price gouge, to just basically flip the building and then to raise rents, jack rents up. And I say this as a rental property owner of a triplex and a duplex. Also, when it comes to TOPA, I think there are ways that we can do this right, where we can keep ownership local, I think is really good for keeping our city healthy. And last but not least, we need to have housing in the future. And that means that we need to continue expanding our housing options, continuing to build. We've had 50,000 people move to Minneapolis in the last 10 years. That's only going to continue. We need to continue to allow more building. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you. The next question. The petition led by the coalition Yes for Minneapolis successfully met the signatures threshold to put the opportunity to create a new Department of Community Safety and Violence Prevention on the November ballot for voters to decide on. Please share your high-level plans on the role of police and other strategies in ensuring safety for everyone in Minneapolis. Aisha, please start.
Yeah, I believe that we all deserve to live in a world where our Black, brown, queer, and trans neighbors can live safe and joyful lives. We cannot achieve safety for all under a public safety system that continues to perpetuate injustice onto our most marginalized community members. I support the abolition of the Minneapolis Police Department through defunding the police department and funding people's lives. Abolition is achieving housing for all and transit that is safe for our BIPOC and trans folks in this city, that it's through workplaces that are democratized and unionized. And then we have to align our priorities and our budgets to reflect that to be true, right? I support the community-led petitions to replace the Minneapolis Police Department with a new Department of Public Safety, and establish community control of what's left of MPD and that new department. I know that these are the first steps for us to approach public safety from a public health-centered perspective. We have to create comprehensive 911 dispatch strategy in this city so that appropriate frontline responders are showing up when people need help. When someone in our community is having a mental health crisis, someone showing up with a gun is not going to make that situation better. It's going to escalate it. And then we also have to fund the organizations and city programs doing frontline work with a public health centered approach to safety. Some of those include Southside Harm Reduction, the Sex Workers Organizing Project, and the Stable Homes, Stable Schools program.
Yeah, so, this is really one of the most important issues facing us, and one of the reasons why I'm running. There are two truths at play here. We must reform our policing system, and we must have police. We are experiencing a really significant increase in violent crime. I was at the street eulogy for Anaya, and those parents, they're not calling for the abolition of police. They are calling for their community to turn in the people who are shooting children in the head to the police, because that community is living in terror. I have lived in countries that did not have adequate law enforcement, and that is a nightmare. My own host father in South Africa was able to make it through the brutal apartheid police state, but what he was not able to survive was the criminal who shot him in the head. So these are the two truths that we must live with, and we have to have leaders who understand that. The other thing that we must do is live in the world that we have now, but build the future that we want. And so that is why I am actually very appreciative of the work of the abolition movement to have us talking about and thinking about and dreaming about a different world. I think that where we have gone astray on that is that it's not really just a matter of changing police culture. It's really a matter of changing us. We have a policing system that's not working for us. We have a city government that is in disarray. The common denominator is us. And so this is why I approach this entire thing through the lens of restorative justice. And I am calling for restorative facilitation training for every member in this city who wants to take that training, so that we can build out the alternative pathways that are currently exist for people, that move them out of the penal system, but also learn new ways of being in community with each other. And we must do this work first in order to make the beautiful vision for tomorrow happen.
So I really believe that the two issues that you were speaking about are very, very important, but I don't think they're tied together. The gun violence in our communities is terrible and it needs to stop. But we also need to work towards police abolition. And I believe, as an abolitionist, it's going to be a long process for us to do that. And I think the best ways for us to get there is starting with voting yes for the Yes for Minneapolis campaign to create the new Department of Public Safety, but also to push for a Civilian Police Accountability Council that will be next year. It's a charter amendment that will actually eliminate the minimum amount of police in the city and then have the civilians in the city be able to hold police accountable for when they do plant a gun, plant drugs, kill someone, or abuse someone. So there's a number of things we need to do to start holding police accountable. We need to work on, defunding the police and reallocating those resources for emergency mental health services, but also helping people out economically. Because I believe in being proactive instead of reactive. The police currently are a reactive force. I don't know how many experiences other people have had with police, but with me, they've shown up a few hours late, filed a report, and I never heard back. So I really think we need to, help people out by raising the minimum wage to $25 an hour, to help them out by giving them free public transportation, free after school programs, free lunches, so that people don't need to turn to alternative means to try to just survive. We need rent control so that we are able to have wages increase, but not have inflation spike with it. So there's a number of things that are all tied together, and I believe we really can create a better world here in Minneapolis.
Just a reminder of the question for folks. The question is the petition led by the coalition Yes for Minneapolis is successfully met the signature threshold to put the opportunity to create a new Department of Community Safety and Violence Prevention on the November ballot for voters to decide on. Can you please share your high-level plans on the role of police and other strategies in ensuring safety for everyone in Minneapolis? Thank you.
Thank you very much for another really good question. First of all, I want to thank Chris Parsons, who's a first responder. He's a fireman. He's one of those people who puts his life on the line on a regular basis. And those people who are in our fire departments and in our police departments do the same thing. Now, are some of them, do they need to be removed? Absolutely. And we're working on that. That's an important piece. I don't support the Minneapolis Yes piece that's going before the council. Here's what I think is really going on. In Minneapolis, the mayor has all the responsibility and none of the authority because we have a weak mayor system. Strong council. And the council has all of the authority, but they clearly haven't shown the responsibility. That needs to change. I grew up in Duluth, which was a strong mayor system. St. Paul is a strong mayor system where Chris has worked. And I support the piece that's coming out of the Charter Commission that will enable and empower whoever is mayor. It's not a judgment on the person who is mayor. Whoever is mayor, to be able to make the kinds of decisions that need to be made and to be held accountable. So the difficulty in all of this is I want to say absolutely no to defund, absolutely yes to transforming the police department, and I want to say yes to don't have the police check up on people who are homeless or people that have addiction issues or those kinds of things. The only time they should show up is if there's a weapon involved. And we need to recruit good new recruits who are diverse and who will work hard at de-escalation. It's very important we get this right. It is crucial we get it right because that's going to bring our city back from the brink it's in right now.
Thank you. Yeah, this is definitely, so as I've been talking to people across the ward, public safety is definitely the number one issue on people's minds. And I have to say that banking on behavior change is not enough. Training is not enough. My current work is actually in behavioral science, and the thing that we know is that structures help influence behavior and how we behave. And so we cannot just rely on people doing better. We need to create the structures that will help them do better. As an engineer, I think about tools. And for the last 150 years, we've effectively had one tool to address public safety. It's time to expand that toolbox, and for that reason, I'm in favor of creating a public safety department, a department that will allow us to have more dedicated mental health responders, folks who can respond to people who are in need of mental health situations, substance abuse situations, or even property crime. I was talking to a neighbor who had a bicycle stolen from her garage, and when she called for help, 2 armed police officers showed up to write a report. It's not even an effective use of our resources. So I think it just makes sense for us to have a public safety department that's thinking more holistically, that is thinking more comprehensively, and more in a coordinated fashion, for how we deliver public safety. That includes having things like the Office of Violence Prevention underneath that umbrella, as well as the 911 dispatch. Those currently are separate from the police department, and so it's time to have that housed under under one umbrella. And I'll also mention that Brooklyn Center has just moved forward with this exact plan. Just the way that their city structure is set up is that they can do that. In Minneapolis, we have to have a charter amendment to allow us to make this change. So this isn't something that is new and novel. Other cities are doing it, and really our next door neighbors are doing it too. And at the end of the day, when this ballot amendment passes, we're going to need someone who can implement it, who can come up with a plan, who is pragmatic and can make sure that as we're transitioning to this new department, that we're doing it in a smart and thoughtful way. And I am ready to do that.
I've been fighting against defunding for about 20 years because I've seen what defunding by Republicans at the Capitol and in the vestige of local government aid has done to our cities and has done to our public safety departments. We're asking public safety to do more and more with less and less. Police officers don't want to go on mental health calls. They don't want to go and disturb people at homeless encampments. They don't want. They want to go out and solve crimes. But because of defunding, we put more and more on them, and we've given them less and less resources to do that with. We need to look at this in a global issue. You know, as this country is founded on the exploitation of Black and brown people, indigenous people, and also the poor. And this isn't history. We're living it today. All you have to do is drive around the city and you see it. As the son of a Black man, I know firsthand systemic racism and also racial profiling. When I was 11 years old, I was walking down Central Avenue with a friend of mine, best friend at the time, who's indigenous, and we were stopped and searched by police because the police officer thought that a little radio I was putting in my pocket was a bag of weed. I was an 11-year-old kid, and that still sticks with me today, that feeling. But I also know that we need to have deep reform within our police department, but we also need safety. So we are a country of laws, and laws don't mean anything if people are not enforcing them. So we need to recreate the police department or rebuild it in our vision and in our values. We have an opportunity within the next couple of years to hire about 1/3 of our police department. So we can hire folks that will carry forward the vision and the values of Minneapolis. I want to see police out in the community, interacting with businesses, interacting with residents, and being public servants, because that's what we hire them to do. But defunding, taking away, is not the way to go. We can be smarter with our resources.
Thank you. And just to remind the audience at home, you can submit questions via our chat. And we will actually start with Alicia this time. And we have a community question this time. The question from the audience was, excuse me, how will you be involved with the Latino community and other communities that you are not already connected with to address issues such as immigration, police brutality, and or Asian hate crimes? Again, how will you be involved with the Latino community and other communities that you are not already connected with to address issues around immigration, police brutality, and or Asian hate crimes?
Yes, thank you so much for this question. You know, this is when I put my campaign together, when I was thinking about the kind of city council member that I want to be, the first thing I did was actually build a team that was a multiracial, multilingual. And you can go to my website and you can see the Latino outreach, Somali American outreach. I myself am Asian American, Native American outreach. So making sure that I have team members who have these kinds of connections to communities that I am not a part of is crucial for the way that I operate. So thank you very much for highlighting this issue and asking that question. I want to highlight one of the problems that Minneapolis has in following through with this sort of thing. The city created the Futuro Latino Empowerment Commission, but they refuse. They have not even responded to people who have applied to be on that commission. It's really not enough to just create a table and seats. You have to actually fill the seats. So, what I want to do as a council member is to really, truly empower community by making sure that these sorts of seats are filled, that they're not just empty promises. The other thing that I want to do is to, in the first, one of the main things that I want to accomplish in the 2 years is to have a definition of engagement. Right now, the city can do anything that it wants and call it engagement. And we know that this is leaving people behind, and it's especially leaving behind these communities that were referenced in the question. So I want us to have a legislated definition of engagement with steps and metrics inside of each one, that you cannot go to step 2 without completing all of step 1. And this has to include the people who are the most affected by a decision or a policy. They have to be the primary people in that step 1. Right? And this is something that we absolutely do not do, particularly with our immigrant communities, and something that I will be partnering with others to accomplish.
Thank you for this question. I'll be honest, I'm not actually too tied into the Latino community. And I believe, though, in class solidarity throughout, though. So an injury to one is an injury to all. So, I'm going to continue to keep an open door, but also, work with groups like Pueblo de Lucha y Esperanza, and anyone else that really wants to directly contact their city councilor. The best things I can promise right now is to really push to move ICE out of Minneapolis completely, and push to get them out of St. Paul and Minnesota all completely. I mean, they're committing human rights violations right now, and it's ridiculous. Even under the Biden administration, we still have mass deportations of people. What is it, 100,000 every month of Biden's first 3 months? There's nothing new under the Biden administration. But I think what the city council can do is create these universal programs to really uplift, all the people, all of our community members, whether it's the Somali community, Ethiopian community, the Oromo people, among Asian Americans, the Latino community, everyone we can, to help bring everyone up together and really take care of the people that are most disenfranchised in our communities.
Okay, 25 years ago, I sponsored the Human Rights Commission in Duluth, Minnesota. It was vetoed by a conservative Christian mayor who felt that we shouldn't be treating everybody equally. We overrode that veto, and it became the law in the city of Duluth. I have fought for equal rights and human rights my entire life. Churches I served sponsored refugees. We brought them in, we found homes for them, we found jobs, we gathered furniture, we did all kinds of things to help people who were coming from other countries that needed a place to live and a new life. I've been involved with the sanctuary movement, which was a very big movement a number of years ago, where churches provided sanctuary for people who were immigrants and considered by some to be illegal. So I have a long record of supporting that, and that's a pretty easy thing for me to do. I remember one of my members of my church was Liberian, who became a U.S. citizen, and I was at her citizenship swearing in. And I got to tell you, it's one of the most powerful experiences of my whole life to see this woman who had come as a refugee, who came from a very difficult circumstance, to become a U.S. citizen. It was hard not to have tears in my eyes as I watched her take her oath, along with people of all different kinds of colors and nationalities. Our country is strong because we are diverse. That's what makes us such a great place to live, to work, and to make a difference in people's lives. And we have to stop all kinds of hate crimes. I stand strongly in opposition to the hate crimes that have been part of our country so much so recently, not just in the Asian community, but in LGBTQ and all other places too. Thank you.
Thank you. And before we continue with Katie, just to remind audience members and the candidates of the question, how will you be involved with the Latino community and other communities that you are not already connected with to address issues around immigration, police brutality, and or Asian hate crimes?
That's a great question, and I think this honestly has to start from actually why I'm in Minnesota. I came to Minnesota because of Concordia Language Villages. It's an immersion summer camp up in northern Minnesota for kids to learn about different cultures and languages, and I think that's honestly what opened my eyes and the doors for me to just understand what are the various experiences of people and cultures throughout the world. And since then, I've just been trying to learn more ever since, and that's what I'll continue doing. I'll continue to show up, and I'll continue to ask questions. I've been a big supporter of the Lake Street Council for a number of years, and because that is one of our most diverse and most beautiful corridors in the city, and particularly it's home to one of the biggest Latinx business communities in the state. I've also been asking questions and learning more about SayTool and about Inquilinos Unidos and trying to support their initiatives. As a city council member, I know that I can't know everything, and so it is my job to represent the people of Minneapolis and to show up for your issues and for the things that matter to you and to respond to them. It's responding to things like making sure that we have municipal IDs so that people can access things with identification that is really crucial, and for advocating more at the state level for driver's licenses for folks who are unable to get around without having that driver's license if they're undocumented. And it's also making sure that we're providing the right funding for the right situations. So I think about the way we've been approaching Neighborhoods 2020. I'm really in favor of moving some of that funding to community-based organizations that are more more focused on our immigrant communities as well as Somali communities. So yes, I'm really excited to be working more with you and moving forward on this. Thanks.
One of the great things about running for city council is you really get to reflect on your life, and I reflect on my life, and I reflect on my life in Minneapolis, and I'm proud of this city. I grew up, as I mentioned before, I grew up in a mixed race home. My family represents every color of the rainbow, and when I was growing up, my best friend was Native American, and I would spend every weekend at his house. His family would spend, or he would spend every weekend at my house. My dad referred to him as our weekend son. They would take me to powwows in North Dakota, or on reservations in North Dakota, northern Minnesota, and northern Wisconsin, and I really gained an appreciation for Native American culture. That's not specific to the Latino community, but it does show just the fact that I have been in this sense, in this world of openness my entire life. Regarding, I'm going to give a shout out to my schools, Marcy Open, Anderson over here in Powderhorn, and South High School on the south side. I was brought up in the Open program, where they taught multiculturalism, cooperation, friendship, self-esteem, and also civic duty. So being a city council person is about bringing government to the people and being a public servant and representing a broad constituency. That means everybody. And as city council, you are the closest person in government to the people. And that means being accessible. Right now, we have a lot of tweeting going on. Tweeting is not leadership. Okay, if we want to get things done, we're going to have to talk to each other, and that's what I intend to do. And I will, fight for people that are not. Come on, you're throwing me off here, David, by laughing. I will fight for people that are that are not recognized as they should be. I will fight for our immigrant community, our undocumented community, and I will be a champion for everybody.
So, Minneapolis has some of the most significant racial disparities in this country. And as a woman of color and a first generation immigrant, I experience firsthand every day how all of our systems are designed to perpetuate racism. Since 2017, I have been involved in the fight for driver's licenses for all, which is a cross racial and ethnic movement led predominantly by Latinx and Black immigrants and organizations, including Pueblos, to make sure that all people in our state, especially folks who are undocumented, have access to a driver's license. So, it's our responsibility to make sure that we are tearing down these systems of oppression and building back ones of support and justice for all of our people. Every city program, from transit routes to social services to community safety, has to be re-examined to make racial justice at the root of every single thing we do. I think we really, so some things that we can work on to address these issues that were listed are, providing reparations to communities that are harmed by environmental justice, preventing the destruction of families by prohibiting any city agency from collaborating with ICE and Border Patrol, providing a free municipal ID to every single person, regardless of their immigration status, ending the targeting and surveillance of our Muslim community, and using the lobbying resources of our city to end cash bail, and implementing policies that protect our Black, Brown, and Indigenous and immigrant-owned small businesses from predatory landlords.
Awesome. Thank you for your answers. Okay. Next question. The city of Minneapolis has recently purchased the 10-acre site of the former Kmart at the intersections of Lake Street and Nicollet Avenue. The development of this land and the reopening of Nicollet Avenue has the potential to drastically change the landscape on both sides of Lake Street. What are your thoughts on the future of the Kmart site, and how will you, as a council member, ensure the community will be involved in that process as well as other city-owned properties?
Yeah. Sorry. That's a good question. I'm very in favor of small businesses over large corporations, but especially cooperatives. I believe that the workplace should be a democratically owned place, where everyone has a say in the production and a share in the profits. So I would love to see, keeping out large corporations and leaving it so that the people that live in the community or want to start businesses here have those options. So I think the city council should, if we have large businesses that want to come to Minneapolis, have them pay a livable wage of at least $25 an hour. So if a business has over 25 employees, they pay $25 an hour. But if it's a smaller business, they have a little bit of variant with the prices. But I think the city council should reserve part of that space, those 10 acres, for cooperatives or small businesses, and we can incentivize Black, Brown, and Indigenous businesses by giving them grants and tax abatement, of course, and then also zero interest loans. But then on top of that, limiting the price of commercial space. I know a lot of the small businesses at Carmel Mall specifically have exorbitant rent prices. We need to have a fair leasing agreement, throughout the city, especially with commercial spaces.
Okay. Well, it was a disaster when they closed off Nicollet Avenue many, many years ago. I'm afraid I'm probably the only one old enough to sort of remember that. Chris, you might on the edge, but I wasn't living here then, but I knew about it because I used to get to the Twin Cities regularly back. I even watched when they dug the Interstate 35 trench, which was really a long time ago. Anyway, long and short of it is, it was a bit of a disaster when all that stuff happened. And now that we have an opportunity, which is a tremendous opportunity, it isn't very often that cities have an opportunity to redevelop things like that 10-acre site. And it's on Lake Street, which is important. It's right near the freeway. It's got a whole bunch of and each street is just down the way, which I visit regularly because I still enjoy eating. And there are great opportunities, and I agree that we have to be sure that we focus our time and our energy on small minority-owned businesses. They were the lifeblood of Lake Street. My husband and I made a significant gift last year when after the destruction on Lake Street, and we're going to need to redevelop all of that. And again, we're going to need resources that come from private, from public, but we need to focus on the neighborhood and having small businesses, minority-owned businesses that will be doing that. So we have a great opportunity. We need to make sure that it works well for all the citizens of Minneapolis. And it's going to be probably 3, 4, 5 years before we see tremendous change there. But it's underway, it's starting, and thank goodness.
Yeah, as an urban nerd, I'm really excited about this question. This makes me think about not only the Kmart site, but also the site behind the Jungle Theater. Where we have city land, we need to keep it as city land, and because once we let go of it, we're never going to get it back. And when we have city land, we have so much more opportunity to realize our city goals when we're in control of it. We know this from other cities. So there's a great example is the city of Vienna in Austria. They own a substantial portion of their city land, and that makes it so it is one of the most affordable cities in Europe. And so if we can hang on to more of our city land, we're going to be able to keep more affordability. And I think we can do that through things like community land trusts. We're actually piloting. So we've done several residential community land trusts, and we're starting to pilot a commercial community land trust actually not too far away from the Kmart site on 26th and 1st. So I would like for us to move forward with those types of things. And when we are designing those spaces, I want us to have design competitions for those. When we have design competitions, we can be more inclusive of the designers who are coming to us. We can have we can make sure that our BIPOC architects and engineers are given opportunity to participate in and be prioritized for these new buildings that will be coming. And then as we're doing that, as these spaces come up, I think we need to be considering how we fill these spaces. There was a great actually example from Duluth from 10 years ago where they offered, so they had another competition for free rent for a year for a new entrepreneur in a space. And I love the momentum that can create. I love the energy that can create for filling these spaces. And last but not least, we need to be engaging the community. The level of engagement that we had for the 2040 plan was unprecedented. I want to have that level of engagement for this site, and I've already started actually talking to the ED of Whittier about this site. So it's going to be really important that we engage our community on this.
Just a reminder of the question for the audience. The question is, what what are your thoughts on the future of the Kmart site, and how will you ensure the community will be involved in that process as well as other city-owned properties?
Well, I know we're not supposed to ask questions of the other candidates, but David, since you were around when they built that Kmart, I'm wondering, what were they thinking? It leads me to kind of wonder with our city government today, when we're planning and building things, what were they thinking? I'll give kind of an old-timey reference since I'm the second most senior person on the panel. There's a movie with Kevin Costner that came out when I was in middle school at Anderson Open called Field of Dreams, and there was a famous line in there called, "If you build it, they will come." He builds a field and a baseball field in the middle of a cornfield, and then all these old-timey players come and play baseball. Well, that doesn't necessarily work in city government. All you have to do is drive around our community, and you can see the empty storefronts. You can see the vacant apartment buildings. If we build it, they won't necessarily come. So we have to have a city that is run responsibly, that is run coherently, and that meets the needs of the people. So we know if businesses are going to be coming back to Nicollet like we hope, we're going to need to be providing access for those businesses. We're also going to need to provide for safety of customers, because we not only want residents to be able to patronize these businesses, but we need people from the outside to come in and patronize these businesses, so that these businesses can thrive, and that we will have good paying jobs for people to be able to afford their homes, and so on and so forth. We see how this works. So when we're designing this area, we need to bring all the stakeholders to the table. We need to bring community to the table, and it needs to be designed in a thoughtful, deliberative way, not policies coming down from City Hall. We need discussions to drive the policies at City Hall, the discussions from the community. And so I will bring those voices from the community. It's also going to take leadership, and you need someone with a track record, proven track record, long track record of getting things done and not necessarily taking no for an answer. And I'm your guy for that. So, yeah, I'm looking forward to the redevelopment of that site and changing our neighborhood.
Yeah, when it comes to the reopening of Nicollet at that at the Kmart site, not former yet, we have to prioritize supporting the small BIPOC and immigrant-owned businesses in that area to make sure that the unique feel to our city and to that community that exists there stays, and that we continue to provide access to wealth for the folks that are in that area. I believe that our dollars should stay in our community, and that right now too much of that wealth ends up in the hands of major corporations and the wealthy. And so, I think that we can combat these predatory redlining practices of big financial institutions by focusing on local banking options and supporting commercial land trusts in this community. Some of the things that I think we can do include expanding the Office of the Small Business Navigator to make it easier and more affordable for people to start and maintain a business, and making sure that those resources are provided in multiple languages, and that we are making sure that our BIPOC and immigrant-owned small businesses receive the municipal grants and recovery funds to take over empty storefronts. And then when it comes to what are we going to do with this site and what should community engagement look like, I'm a firm believer that if community engagement continues the way it always has, that the people with the most amount of access and privilege will be the only ones whose voices are heard. And so if we want to make sure that the folks who live in the community around Kmart, right, which is where I live, which is one of the most dense and diverse communities in the city, right, actually have our voices heard in this process, that's going to mean that we are, engaging with folks so that they can, give their feedback in multiple languages, so that they can give their feedback in ways that actually spark creativity, and so that folks can show up at times and in spaces that are accessible to them.
Yeah, rather than talk about the process that we're going to use to make sure that community is involved as the last thing, I want to make sure it's the first thing that I talk about here, because it is the first thing on my mind as I think about all of the city problems that we're facing. And I think that we do have a great opportunity at Kmart, but I do want to take a moment to acknowledge that this is a big loss for a lot of people, a lot of immigrant communities and low-income communities who have relied on the Kmart. And we want to make sure that whatever goes in is serving those people plus others, and serving those people in providing the retail opportunity that they need, but also in all the other ways that it can be that it can serve them. So we need to talk about community process. It was said that 2040 had the historic level of engagement. That was largely one kind of engagement. And I think that it was the lowest common denominator of engagement. We need to really radically re-envision this word engagement. It cannot be just a survey. I want to repeat that. It cannot be just a survey, right? So, one of the things one of the community advocacy things that I've done is work on in Cincinnati a greenway it was a former railroad bed that was going to turn into something a lot like the greenway, which it has happened the Wasson Way. And what we did is we set up a design charrette where the community members came in and they were the ones who did the design. We didn't offload that work to somebody else. We brought in the local, design architects from the city to work with community. And that's what I would like to see us do. Make sure, as Aisha said, that we have all of the different language options available so truly everybody can participate. I was part of the community that was working at the Garfield lot to try to put in community voice. And this is one of the reasons why I'm running, because it was a very difficult to just try to get in that room. And that is not right. And that is one of the things that I will change, not only as I'm a city council member, but for the future.
Thank you. And before we close off, I would like to thank all the candidates for your time for participating in this forum. All to the audience members, yes, we could do a round of applause. To our audience's members online for watching, Marcus from Whittier and Whittier for co-hosting with us. So thank you to everyone, and you can share this video to your friends, to families, so they can watch it and hear more from you guys. And I would like to invite Antonia from Pueblos de Lucha Esperanza to close us off. So thank you to everyone.
Thank you, everybody. My name is Antonia Alvarez. I'm president from Pueblos de Lucha en Esperanza. And I want to tell you very clear from my position. I'm immigrant undocumented, but I'm concerned what issues affected in our communities. I have a citizen children's, they walk into the school, and I need make sure the future for my children is no more uncertain. We need safe in this country. I'm undocumented, but I'm part in this community. Whatever is affected for you is affected in my life, and the struggles is affected. They no look, you are immigrant or you are citizen. The struggle is a struggle and affected everybody. Thank you so much, and thank you the audience for you are here. Please share this video, and the time for vote, take responsibility when it's the time for vote, and make it sure who is the real leader. I don't want it another incident or another situation like the example George Floyd, and you waiting 3 days for make it the public information. How are you feel, or what do you think about the situation? We need make the action, and we need leaders. This position is no easy position. It's not easy. It's very uncomfortable, but you make your decision room for this position, make it the true actions. Thank you so much, everybody.